Okay, good morning. We continue our journey in Hemshech Samach Vav. We are page 58. 58. The anatomy, the mechanics, the spiritual mechanics of time. Zman. So let's just review what we've established so far. First thing, Sheish Shazman, which earlier we've already established begins in the world of Bria, and Atzilus is only Seder Zmanim, meaning the order of time, the concept of time, different ways we discussed it. Keser is above time in each structure. So Zman itself is in the domain of Bria. That's its, we'll call it its parameters. But what is the root of time? Sheiresh Zman, he called that ratzo v'shov. I like the word escalation. First I thought of using fluctuation. Then I realized fluctuation is not consistent. That can be sporadic and so on. Escalation is more of a consistent flow. We'll call it a rhythm. The rhythm of ratzo and shov, which also looking for words. And I have to say, using ChatGPT, we've come up with a few more extra words. So I always use the words tension and resolution. Doesn't always fit right here. It also can mean recession and extension, as in istalkus and ispashtus, which he does use. You can use it as withdrawal and expression, or again extension, or transmission. But I'd rather use for transmission hamshacha. So bottom line is, the root of time is ratzo v'shuv, is this escalating, this rhythm, the process that God employed to create existence, that hachayis ratzo v'shuv. The Pasuk says, hachayis ratzo v'shuv, and he translates here, chayis means the divine energy, chayis aliki, the divine energy that comes from Dvar Hashem. So God speaking, it doesn't have to be ratzo v'shuv. One can speak, even though speaking is connected to breath. You could technically say it is a form of ratzo and shuv, but hypothetically speaking, could just be a flow, just like you pour water or any other transmission of energy. But no, he made it hachayis ratzo v'shuv, that the flow is in a rhythmic way, like a pulse. You got a pulse, a ripple, and that is what creates seder v'hadraga, what he called kedima v'ichur, the idea of hierarchy and sequence, order and progression, through the histalkus and hispashtus. If it didn't have this histalkus and hispashtus, this rhythm, these words he uses clearly. There would be no hierarchy. There would be no order and sequence. The oz eifan amshach is galus shekulam bayim b'shaveh. Then the manner of his galus of amshach. That's why I use here. The transmission was not in the form of a rhythmic ratzo v'shuv, then it wouldn't be kedima v'eichur, because the eifan amshach, the manner of the transmission by his galus and revelation, would be everything equal. It is the rhythm that creates the order and the hierarchy, because, like he said earlier, keser is nimshach, the eira keser, then there's a pause, and then is nimshach chochmah. So that's very balbatish in a very technical sense. Okay, again, summing up what we learned. So chayis ratzo v'shuv. Now this chayis is a chayis that is an energy that flows, and he gives now the example, the operative example we've been using of breath. Human breath, let's just read it inside. So Sheiv Sibus Hazman B'chol Madreg is ratzo v'shuv. Spashtus Kristalkis B'shpak. Ukamoshel Nishimas Ruach Achaim Sheba like the example of the breath of the spirit of the human being. שבכל רגע נמשך החייס מן המוקר ממקור נפשי. Every moment the chayis flows or transmits from Mekir Nafshe, from the source in the soul. The soul is obviously the source of the life. Umiyad, kerega, and a moment afterwards, chayzer achayis lotzeisu listalik min aguf. The chayis then returns. It's not just flowing in one direction. It's two-directional, basically. It returns, or listalik, and withdraws, or recedes, min aguf, from the body. Lisalis, to elevate, uliskal, and be encompassed, b'mekere shenimshech memeno, in the source where it originated from. And then again, v'chayzer v'nimshech chayes acher. And then and returns and repeats, another chayes repeats, and it's not the same chayes. Chayes acher. That's the mashal. And what's the nimshal? U'kamoy kain. Hu b'chinas ta'chayes aliki shenimshech l'hachis e'elamis. The same was the chayes aliki, the divine energy that energizes existence, the world. The acher shenimshech, after it extends, after it transmits, miyad hu b'chinas istalkus liskal b'mkede. Immediately, it's in a state of withdrawal or state of receding, to be encompassed in its source. Shezeu b'chinas harotze. Rotze is being the istalkus. V'chezer v'nimshach chayes acher. And then chezer v'nimshach returns and transmits another chayes, which is like shov. Rotze, shuv, the rhythm. And we stop there. 4 lines from the bottom of page 58. So let's continue. Unless someone wants to ask anything or comment. One thing that intrigues me, if I may, not that it changes meaning here at all. I'm just thinking about it. Why is it indeed that if a person didn't have a soul, God forbid, a body, a corpse without a soul, can breathe from today till tomorrow, it won't breathe. It doesn't have the power to breathe. And breath, even if you pumped oxygen into the physical body, nothing's going to happen. What happens? What exactly is on the other hand, if you only had a soul and a body, but you didn't have oxygen, God forbid, a person also wouldn't have the Ruach Chaim that we're talking about. So just wondering, intrigued to me, it's very intriguing, how does that work exactly? How does the soul interact with the oxygen? Like, on one hand, it's coming from the soul. The soul is the thing that's giving life to the body. Is the oxygen like gas? Like, let's say, gasoline we put into a car? In other words, you have a car, that's like the body. The gasoline is like the oxygen. But if the car didn't have an engine, you could fill her up with gas from today till tomorrow, it won't work. Just wondering, how is it like the oxygen that
Adam hu nefesh? It's something in between, because that's why the dam is warm.
So it could be very possible that the oxygen we know becomes oxygenated into the blood. The blood needs oxygen. A blood without oxygen cannot function. And the dam is ultimately the life blood, like you just said, the life energy, like the gasoline, so to speak, within the body. The oxygen feeds it. There must be some other properties the oxygen provides besides just blood, because the blood is not created by the oxygen. The blood is energized by the oxygen, refreshed. Because remember, the blood does not need to be refreshed every second anew. Even though the blood, the heart contracts and expands, the blood flows, and it's a constant flow, but the breath is actually a new breath, and then you eliminate the carbon monoxide.
Maybe the neshama is like the spark plug. You know, a engine can't run with the spark plug, even if there's gas in the tank. You know?
No, I agree. I for sure. I think the neshama is even more than the spark plug. It's probably the whole engine, really. It's like the whole. It's his inner soul. No, I wasn't asking why do we need a neshama? I was thinking just more about, since he says that every second the chayis is new, and it comes from the Makere, that was what made me think. Like,
why do you need every second the high
in other
should
words,
be
no,
new?
no, so let me just finish my sentence. 1 second. My point was, since every moment you're going back to the source to draw ratzo, to draw the energy anew, then it enters, and then again you go back. So what is the source? Let's put it that way. The source sounds like Mekir Nafshe, the nefesh. But when you think about breath, the source is not the air in the street. It's not the oxygen around you. Anyway, I just was wondering the language exactly. What is the Mekir Nafshe? What is the oxygen doing? That's all.
It seems to me
The Mokeh
that
Nafshe is the soul, is the neshama. But how is it activating together the oxygen with the blood? I don't know.
Okay,
But
I hear you. I just as I said, it doesn't change Havana here at all. I was just trying to visualize what the parts, the moving parts. Go ahead. You want to say
I
something?
don't understand why every second it has to be a new highest. Why can the neshama not give one highest and constantly to continue? Why do you need the ratzo and shov in the goof? I understand that the ruchni is because you have to be a keli
No,
to accept.
I think because he said earlier, if you really want hischalkus, distinction, you constantly need a flow. Like if keser overlaps chachma, you constantly need a pause of one level in order to create the next level. That's what it sounds like he said earlier.
Yeah, this I understand, but in a physical goof, why do you need it?
Okay. Maybe that the Rebbe asked a question about a different thing. Why hamachadish betuve bechol yem tamid? The Eibishter could have made one flow of energy. He doesn't have to renew it every minute or every second. And the Rebbe was an interesting answer because the Rebbe said he wanted a relationship with existence every second anew. He didn't want it to be like kol yem yeh beinecha chadashim. He wanted a constantly new. It's like a real relationship. When you love someone, you always want to connect to them all the time. Interesting gevart. It's more like a vedic gevart, but that, so it's a constant. But I don't know if that's what
Rabbi,
I would say.
What if, I'm sorry, Mr. Sable, did you want to say something?
He did, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
thank you. I just want to comment. It seems to me that the necessity of needing oxygen is a function of the body. It's for the guf, not for the neshama. Just like the blood is a necessity for the guf, not for the neshama. The fact that the neshama lives in the dam and uses the oxygen, I'm not sure there's a need for that. I don't know.
No, it's a good point. You're good point. The neshama in heaven doesn't need oxygen. A neshama without a guf does not need oxygen with definitely not physical oxygen. It may need spiritual chayis from Elakus, but I agree. That's a good point, a very good point.
Robert, I have a question.
What's that? Let me just 1 second. Let me just finish. Let me just finish that thought. So it's a good point that the body is what needs the energy. Okay, I don't want to really digress too much because the topic is clear. Just was trying to cover the whole picture as much as possible. Yeah, go ahead.
Neshima and neshama are the same thing, right?
That's correct. Neshama is neshima, is breath. That's correct.
I was just going to ask why it's, b'chol rega, and it seems to me that it's bound up
That's
with
what
the
Rav
notion.
Shlomo just asked.
Right. But it seems like it would be in keeping with what you said, that the God's constantly recreating, but even more so, everything that exists from a certain perspective is godly, is vivified by godly energy. We know this, right? There's everything that exists, the creation, falls into 4 categories, and even the domem has a chayas to it. It's a lot of klipa covering it up, but it's vivified. Its very existence is from the
Therefore,
Eibishter.
what's your point?
Okay, and so you think about time. We just said it's a pulsation. It's an oscillation. So that interaction between Nivraim and the Eibishter and Elokus, the flow of godly energy, is a pulsing, oscillating matter. And so once that gets placed into something that exists, then it must oscillate. So
it doesn't must anything. It could, the Eibishter could have made it. It's one flow. It's not must anything. Anything could be done many different ways. It is correct that existence is constantly renewed, but there's an explanation for that in Shar Yichud V'Amunah. There are different explanations given for the consistent oscillation that we're talking about.
But it just seems like if there's an act of creation, every moment,
It doesn't have to be that way. It could be the Eibishter could be mamshech chayis into something, and it has that chayis. Doesn't have to every second renew it. You could explain it either way. Anyway, it's not relevant so much to our conversation here because he's not coming to make a case for the perpetual force here.
I guess I think I'm just suggesting it's connected to the notion of, on
We've
the one
talked
hand,
about that.
Yeah.
He said it clearly himself. He said, "Mechadash betuve b'chol yom tamid ma'aser bereishis."
Yeah.
That's we say that. We say it every day. That
Right.
It's constantly renewed, the energy. That God constantly renews the energy. It could very well be it's exactly that. It's not a. Anyway, Rav Shlomo was not asking the Ruchnius. He said, from Alakus, we understand it. He was asking, why do you need it Bagashmis that way?
Right.
Why
I understand.
Why does the breath have to be that way?
So, okay.
So there you could either say, because the Eibishter is making it should parallel it. I gave the explanation, like the Rebbe said, the idea of relationship, that you have a constant relationship to the source. Different ways you can explain it.
Well, we talked just.
Anyway,
I want to take one last.
Why
stab
is it
at
so? It. I mean, it's not relevant so to the topic we're talking. It's just we're talking in general. The whole idea now.
Well, but I think it is. I mean, why did the Eibishter?
In my opinion, not. But okay.
Well, I mean, Eibishter did not create the universe and then like become passive. This is a fundamental
we know
belief.
that. That's not discussion here. That's not even on the table.
Okay,
that's
so
it has.
So it's continuous, but in order that there be time, it is related time. Ratzo v'shuv, it has to be a pulsation, an oscillation. So that gives
nothing has to be. First of all, nothing has to be from God's point of view. Let's make that clear. He wants it to be.
Right.
That he wants it to be that way, that's clear. He made it that way. He says clearly, b'chol rega, it's renewed, and that's that. Well, no one's disagreeing with the reality that it is a constant renewal and a perpetual one. The discussion here was the reason why. What's the reason behind it?
And I'm trying to say, because why do we celebrate?
You said it already, so we heard it, and I responded.
I know, but just like, why do we celebrate Pesach? Why did the Eibishter manifest himself during the story
but Rabbi Yitzchak, you said it, and we all understood. I responded, and I said, yeah, but what I would say most relevant here is the reason for it is because he wants structure. Kedima ve'ichur. He said, these are the words he did say. He said, if you didn't have kashem shachis shalei ba'efen of istalchus and ispashtus, ein shayb chins kedima ve'ichur. That's the reason. That's the actual reason he gave, that there wouldn't be hierarchy and structure and sequence, because the hamshacha is galus would be kulam boyim b'shava. That's the reason he gives here. Whether this means that's why you need every moment renewed can be discussed as well. That is what he said here to explain what's the connection to time. That's why time is constantly moving, because every second is being so-called renewed, refreshed. It's another pulse, so to speak, of this rhythm of ratzo v'shuv. That's for sure what he said. Beyond that, we've been discussing, it's connected to Machadash Betuve, it can be connected to what I just said, the relationship God wants to have constantly with us, and so on. So It's all part of the conversation.
Yeah. It's a good summary. I think it's very important. I appreciate you indulge in entertaining and bringing it up. Nice.
Good. So With that, let's go back to we're now 4 lines from the bottom of page 58. And let's continue. So taking the same idea that he's been discussing till now, he says, V'chein hu, pages can be found at samachvav.com. V'chein hu b'hamshachas ha'er, b'atzilas gamkein, b'bchinas ratzo v'shuv. So he already made the rule, he already said the rule before. Remember, he mentioned earlier, this is all part of the mimer of the Alter Rebbe, that mimer in Moriad Murazak in Yonim, the mimer Lahavina Hagah B'Lekut Hamorim. So he said earlier, a few lines before, he said that an Ekmei Kein Chayes Aliki. I'm just looking for what the lashon I was using. Yeah. The Sherish Sibur says, "Man b'chilchom who begins haratz b'shuv sheboy in each world, and in general." So the same thing is hamshachas ha'er ba'atzilus. Remember now, er and atzilus is also hamshacha. Just like we spoke about er in general, and er and keser and chachma and so on. So the chachma hamshachas er ba'achach. Gam ke begins haratz b'shuv. Once the pasuk says v'achayis haratz b'shuv, it became now a rule that chayis, divine energy, flows in the rhythm of ratzo and shuv. Ke'eru b'chinas ratzo, lalis ulikolel b'imkerei. The that's nimshach into atzilus is in a state of ratzo, meaning the does not just settle in, period. The is constantly in a state of yearning, longing, what we called before withdrawing, receding, elevating. To elevate, uli kolbim kere. That's what it's about. Especially in Ruchnius. The Ratze element of Oyer gives it its vitality, and I would say more than vitality. It gives it its sense of source, a constant connecting to the source. In other words, the Oyer doesn't. It's not like, think of an example, let's say, I always give the example of a pitcher of water. Once you pour water from a pitcher, from the source, the water is not yearning to get back into the pitcher. It doesn't have that feeling. The water knows its purpose. It now flows wherever it's sent. Like any shliach. You send a shliach somewhere, they do their mission. Once they're sent, they're sent. The truth is, the Rebbe, coming to shluchim of the Rebbe, he always wanted the shluchim to always feel the yearning to always come back to the source, to their meshaleach. But that's part of this idea. But Oyer, by definition, has the element of ratze in it. Lalis ulikol b'mkere, ukabashikosav mokamachar atam al zeh. Like discussed elsewhere, the reason for it. And he gives the source in footnote 29, is it? Let me see.
That's correct.
Yeah. So there he explains the different reasons. There are, I think, more than a few reasons why it has that natural ratze. Besides what we said here, that there's a constant flow, that there is that is really what makes that it's constantly it never, so to speak, departs from its connection to its source. In a way similar to we learned earlier about Ratzon. Remember when he started talking about Ratzon, he gave the example of That all it is an expression of the Moir. It's not the Moir, but all it is an expression of the Moir. So I'm not sure if this is connected to the same here, but it may be that's connected to that point.
What's
so
the mimer? He just says, what's the specific mimer? In footnote 20 says, Barucha Sofa Mimer Tafresh Samach
Sefer HaMamorim. He's referring to, if you look at footnote 28, I believe. 1 second. I think it's 28. Yeah. And 28 are the actual page numbers. And 29 is referring back to footnote 29.
Oh, thank you. It's
two Maimorim, Tofres Samachay and Tofres Ayin Zayin. They're both from the Rebbe Rashab. Okay, good. That's the Rotze part. Vayidei nase. And here comes how Zman is created. Vayidei nase b'chinas hischalkus hazman. And it's this movement, let's call it, this shift, this movement, this tenua movement, is what creates the distinction of time. Remember, time is the distinction of past, present, future. The ma'achas sheyesh b'chinas histalkus v'hispashtus. Being that the Ur has histalkus and hispashtus on an ongoing basis. In other words, the Ur never becomes just a quiet, what's the word I wanted to use? Like I mentioned the other day, what's the word? Like a lake that's completely no ripples on a lake. There's a word for it. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, I used it before, the words where we talked about
stagnant.
No, I don't. Not stagnant is not at all the words. That's not the word. I want to use a positive word. Calm, a calmness, a stillness that exists. The think about Ein Sof before God employs ratzo v'shuv. So it's beyond time. It's timeless. It's spaceless. It's endless. It's shapeless. It's defineless. It's no definitions. And then we spoke about that God employs a mechanism, lack of a better word, ratzo v'shuv, that creates a fluctuation, creates a oscillation we spoke about. It creates a rhythm, a pulse. And that in turn creates the movement that will, the stalkus, the hispashtus of the Ur, the ratzo v'shuv, that in turn creates Zman. Just going back to the original mechanics of it. Remember, that was the whole point of the parsha, to understand Zman. So he says, being that the Ur is not just this smooth, flowing Ur, it's a histalkus and hispashtus. So that's what causes the Ur to come in stages, so to speak, in increments, if you wish. Or like what he said before, a sequence, the sequence of the hierarchy of Kedima ve'ichur, of before and after. Shemistalika v'chayzer v'nimshach. It's mistalik, it withdraws or recedes, v'chayzer v'nimshach, and then returns and is nimshach. It's like the waves of the ocean. Remember, we used the example of the waves, which takes us back to the example of the heartbeat and the breath. They're all in the same category. An oscillating rhythmic flow that goes back and forth. That means the air is not just keeps flowing, nifsek, it pauses. And he repeats now what he said earlier. If there was only just a flow and there was no pause, there was none of this oscillation, there was none of this back and forth. No, it was only hamshach, just have a transmission of light. Transmission of light. It's not in the form of histalkus, hispashtus, meaning withdrawing, returning, receding, extending. You don't have the contraction, expansion, or the inhale and exhale, or the waves of that we've been discussing. Next page, page 59. So then it would just flow. And if it just flows, you just have one flow of divine energy. It would not pause. And then it would be in the form of bli gvul. Similar to what he said before, Keser would flow. And where would you have room for the next level? It's the flow of energy, and that's that. It's the pause that allows room. But when it's in a state of histalkus and hispashtus, the to and fro, what are we talking about? Of the running and returning, ratzo and shuv, the extension and the withdrawing, or the receding and the expanding, and so on. This hamshach is pauses, as it's flowing, it pauses. Harizeh moker lischalkus hazman. That's what creates the source for the distinctions of time, because time is the exact opposite of one seamless flow. Yes, even though we call it the flow of time, but every second is a new second. There'd be no past, present, future if you didn't have. In other words, going back to our original discussion, remember imagining imagining a reality without time and space, this whole thing doesn't have any significance. This is only because God created structure. And how did he create structure? He uses ratzo v'shuv, which is fascinating. Because you could have argued, I'm thinking about it right now, you could have argued, you know what? Just as God has the power to create the infinite, he also has the power to create gvul. We know that from the Avodas HaKodesh, and the best proof is Kalim. The first gvul he creates are Kalim. So why can't you just argue like this? The oir is a seamless flow. There's no ratzo v'shuv, there's no pauses, there's no withdrawing, there's no returning, there's no rhythm. All that we're discussing here, this back and forth. Oir is oir. And then he created Kalim. And Zman comes from Kalim. Why do you have to say it's coming from oir? I just thought of that as we're learning this. Because I remember the first time I ever learned this piece, I think I thought of the same question, but at the end of the day, I never ended up asking it. But I think the beauty here is, because he wants to show that Zman is not originating only in Kalim. It goes all the way back to Eir Ein Sof. In other words, Elikus itself deepens the interface between the Bli Gvul and the infinite element of Oir, together with the structure of Zman. Because Zman is not just a construct coming from the Kalim. Like, for example, when we talk about the colors, that the Oir, which is colorless and shapeless, assumes a color just like you put water, colorless liquid, into test tubes that are tinted, so then the water will look like blue, red, green, whatever the color of the test. But the water never assumes the color blue or red. It just looks that way. In other words, it appears that way. It's like the seichel of the Rav, who's using a mashal to explain an idea to his student. So through the lens of the mashal, it looks a certain way, even though the idea is really higher than the mashal. But when you say that Zman is rooted not just in the Kalim, that it's actually rooted in the Oir itself, in the fluctuations, or I'll use the oscillations of the Oir, it makes the connection a much deeper one. This is purely a yesh lemer, which I've not heard. Maybe the Rebbe Rashab will say it, maybe it says somewhere. I just was thinking of it as we're speaking. He's saying he's making such a strong case for why Zman, the root of Zman is in Oir and ratzo v'shuv, and you could say, you know what, why not just attribute it to the Kalim and Gendik? I'm not suggesting makes the question easier, because it's still God creating the Kalim. Let's not get that. It's still the Kalim. But the fact that he makes it that it's Oir tells you the Oir itself. In other words, the water itself becomes waves. The waves are not an outside force. They're part of the process of how the water flows from the ocean to the beach. And the same thing with our breath, and the same thing with the heartbeat. That it's all part of the very flow of the energy flow. It's not a Kalim thing. It's not that you breathe in infinite amount of Oir, and your lungs figure out to only take in a little amount of Oir, a little amount of oxygen. It's not the way it is. We breathe in only a certain amount of oxygen from the outset. In other words, the Hagbola that he's talking about, the Hischalkos, the structure of the rhythm that we're addressing here, is all part of the original process. Just thought I would throw that in as part of the discussion. It just jumped out at me as I was reading this. So,
question, Rabbi.
Just a second. I just want to make sure I finish the sentence. I'll stop for a question. Just give me a minute. 1 second. So it was bli b'chigul of a kasher b'chinas histalkus v'ishpashtus har you nifsik b'am shachose har ze mokel hischalkus hazman. Let me just give me another 2 lines. I think it's important here. Ke'inyan azman hu hafsik. Now he adds, I'd like to go back to the Alter Rebbe's Maimer and see how much of this is the Rebbe Rashab's explanation, how much is from the original Maimer. I'm going to do that. I'm very intrigued to see that. Because Zman hu hafsik. Zman is pause. That's what Zman is. U'k'moy sha'omrim. U'k'moy k'sha'omrim. Like when we say, Shenimshach k'sho shtayim. It's an expression in the Gemara and other places that something extends an hour or two. Someone will say, how long is it going to take? It's going to take an hour or two. How long did it take? It took an hour or two. So the Rebbe Rashab is using that as an example. So when you say that, Hainu mipnei shenifsek hamshachah. That means the mere fact that you're calling something with a time interval means there's a pause. That's what time is all about. Sunday, Monday, it could be a long period of time. You could say it'll take a month. It'll take 10 years. It'll take 100 years. But all that defines a finite parameter. An hour or two, a minute, a second, a century, a millennium. So it's all that's what time is defining. That whatever was happening, whatever that time period, whatever was happening during that time period that had to happen, came to an end. Pesach begins the 15th of Nisan, and it ends on the 22nd of Nisan. Shabbos begins a certain time Friday late afternoon, and ends a certain time Saturday night. So it's nifsek hamshacha she'imoy nimshach tamid b'li hefsek. If the hamshacha would continue without pause, ein shaykh le'em k'shar shtayim. Then you can say the words like an hour or two. Kim mepnei shenifsek. It's only because it pauses. Shezeu inyan azman. He's not saying zman is pause. Hefsek is a word, means a pause. It means that zman, its very entity, its very definition is connected to intervals, to time periods, to pauses. That's what he's saying here. Zeu azman. Ulezois b'chinas hafsek shebe'er zeu mokar azman. And that's why, going back to the original point, the hefsek in the oyer, the fact that there's a pause in the oyer, that's what creates the pause that becomes the root, the source of time. So he really spells it out explicitly, exactly how this moves from the ratzo v'shuv pause to the pauses that exist in the structure of as we know and understand, the sequence and structure of time. Okay, we'll stop here. Please go ahead. You want to ask something?
Yeah. So for clarity, are we saying here that the beginnings of time starts from Eilam HaAtzilus or from the Hamshachas Ha'ar, what to say? Where does time begin? I'm still not clear. Where does actually time start?
He didn't come back to it, so I want to see how the Rebbe Rashab is going to get back to it. It's a good question. If you asked me right now, I would say Zman still begins in Bria. The Seder Zmanim, the concept of time in Atzilus, and the root of it all begins in the ratzo v'shuv of Oyer, even higher than Atzilus. That's how I would probably explain it. But like everything in Ishtalshalus, in higher levels, it's not yet really time as we know it. It's more like in Oyer, there's the escalation that we're discussing, and as it will it'll start taking on more shape and form in Atzilus, and then especially in Bria, that's when time will become a really effective. Like in a way, like we discuss about the development the gestation development of a child in pregnancy. It begins one cell, and that one cell has everything in it, but it's not yet. You can't yet tell there's a child. You can't tell limbs and organs. So that's how I would. That's how I envision all this. He's talking about a process of evolution from the earlier stages where is completely seamless as an Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. Then after Tzimtzum begins this process. The question you could ask is that ratzo v'shuv and before the tzimtzum, how high does the ratzo v'shuv go? Is it in the highest levels or not? These are all very good, fair questions. But I would wait, if you don't mind, to see till he finishes the whole subject. Very likely he's going to come back and tell us, address what you're asking. But it's a very good question. So
how would you define
I
seder
don't
zman
mind.
different from zman?
What's that? Let him finish. Let him just follow up. Go ahead. Sorry.
I said I don't mind. What you just said makes a lot of sense to me, and it was pretty good.
Yeah, but you know what? But I always like to be grounded. We'll read inside and see how he's definitely going to explain it, because the Rebbe Rashab began with Zman, Bria, Atzilus, Seder Zmanim. So I'm waiting to see. It's fascinating how all this is emerging. You could literally see he's mamish dissecting the anatomy of structure as we know it. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
How
go
would
ahead.
Does this connect to
how-
when
how
the
would
light
you
is
define-
withdrawn and then returns?
Well, one at a time. Robin, you want to go ahead? Go.
It's Hannah. I was just asking if
Hannah, sorry.
It's okay. When Rosh Hashanah, when it says the light withdraws, and then when you hear the show for the next day, it comes back. Is that connected to this withdrawal and return in a major way?
I was waiting for someone to ask. A very good question. Excellent question. Yes, it is. Because in the time structure itself, there are periods where there's a bigger withdrawal than usual. Like what you're saying, Rosh Hashanah, the whole year, the energy of the year is being refreshed. It's almost like, I'll give a human example. You know, we need to breathe every second, obviously. But there are times you go exercise and you get yourself a whole new, what do they call it? One of these refresher packages, where you really go through a whole rigorous exercise that refreshes you. Now, someone will say, what's the difference between that and your daily exercises or your constant breathing exercises? The answer is that there are times you need to go back to the source to get a whole new level of energy. So in Zman itself, there are Maimoric Chassidus that speak that Zman is like klal uprat. So if you really want to go more broadly, all of it begins in the beginning of creation. But then there's the 6 millennia. Every millennia has its own energy. Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, all the way to Malchus. That's the 6th, and then the 7th millennia, Mashiach. Then each millennia has 100 years, has every century, Mei Shana. Every Mei Shana, the decades. And then every year, every Rosh Hashanah has its package. So there's a klal of prat going on, a type of a broader energy and a more limited. It's like branches on a tree. So everything originates from the trunk of the tree, but then the branches begin to branch off. Every year is a branch. And then within the year itself, the months, each of them is a smaller branch within that branch. So the concept that we're discussing applies to the same idea, but it's of course on a different level. Rosh Hashanah is not the same type of renewal as every moment. Chassidus explains that B'chadash B'tuve B'chol Yom Tov and Ma'aseh Bereishis, that every second is renewed, and asks, but it isn't, so what happens in Rosh Hashanah if every second existence is renewed? So it says, that's Chiddush HaYeshenus. That's like renewing something that's already existing, you keep refreshing it. It's like maintenance of something, it's renewing it, but it's still of the existing entity. And Rosh Hashanah, like he says in Tanya, in Ageres HaKedesh 14, and the Arizal explains it, that Rosh Hashanah Nuch Chodosh, that was never there before, comes. So through the year, you can't call it Chodosh Mamish. You're not going to see here, he says necessarily Chodosh. He said Achayis Acher, another energy. It doesn't necessarily say a new energy, meaning completely new, unprecedented. It's new in regard to the previous energy. So it's basically relative levels, and therefore there's always that possibility, Rosh Hashanah, a whole new level of chayis, a new level of brachas, of blessings that come to us. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead. Rab Shleimer, you were in the middle of beginning to say something. No more? Okay. So let's see, where are we here?
How is Seder Zmanim different than Zman?
I don't want to go into it right now because he didn't say Marmokim. If you look down below, you'll see the Marmokim in Samach Tzedek in Derech Mitzusecha Manas Alakus. If you look in footnote,
But I remember you a few days ago, you said one sentence that gave us some idea. I don't remember what the sentence is.
yeah, on footnote 18, he brings the Samach Tzedek. I said the concept of time or the order of time, meaning just like Chesed in Bria is rooted in Chesed and Atzilus, you could say Zman in Bria is rooted in Zman and Atzilus, but in Atzilus, it's not quite Zman as we know it. It's more the concept of time. It's more you could say the structure of Gedima ve'ichur, like Chochmah and Bina in Atzilus is more that Chochmah is Kedima to Bina. In Bria, it's already, they have Eris and Kalim, it's already a Metzias of a Yesh, it's an identity. There are things to say. I'm specifically didn't go into detail. I'd rather wait to see how the Rebbe Rashab himself explains everything, and then we'll go back and see what remains. I will explain the difference between Seder Zmanim and Zman. But there are, if you want to look ahead, there are footnotes that will give you some information on that. But I will discuss it. I will discuss it, for sure. Now, there's one more piece. Okay, we'll wait ready till tomorrow. There's one more piece he adds that makes it even stronger, this correlation, this connection between the ratzo v'shuv rhythm and its escalation to this chalkus of Zman. The first point he made was clear that it causes the pause, which is the definition of time, the pauses that are necessary, the hefsek. So the hefsek in the oyer, which is the ratzo and shuv that creates the hefsek, mashnistalaku that. But now he's going to go and say even more than that. But I'll wait till tomorrow for that. You know what? I'm going to read one more line. I have a taiva to read it. It says, V'gam, I'm going to read one more sentence. V'gam be'istalkus v'ispashtus, in the istalkus v'ispashtus ratzo v'shuv, again, the removal, the withdrawal, or the receding and extension and expansion. Yeshkan inyan hazman. In addition to what we just spoke about pauses, that there has pauses which in turn create the pause in time, the istalkus v'ispashtus, yes, you have also time. How? Ki mashenistalaku ovar. When something is just flowing endlessly, there's really no past, present, or future. It's just one flow. But once you say nostalgic, means something was withdrawn, that's the past. That just happened. That gives you a something that, like a type of signpost, if you wish. I would call it a time post, actually. Ovar. Umasha nispashet to asid. Umasha mispashet. And that which will extend is the next step, is future. Hari yeshkan inyan azman, the ovava asid. So in other words, the very, besides the fact of the pauses he discussed, the very fact that you have now a distinction between istalkus and ispashtus right away gives you an element that is subject to time intervals, with one being past, one being future. Now, he doesn't say necessarily physical past and future. This can be conceptual too, and we'll discuss that. Because you could say conceptual, kedima ve'ichur. You know, when Kesed recedes, in order for Chochmah to emerge, it doesn't mean Kesed disappears. It just means right now, Kesed is receding to allow for the presence of Chochmah. But that right away tells you, like he says here, there's an Ovar and a Asid, which would be basically this concept of histalkus and hispashtus. That which just was removed. So when a person says, I breathed, my last breath is the past. My future breath is the future, meaning my next breath. Same thing with a heartbeat. Interesting, he doesn't mention hoive. He doesn't mention present. Why doesn't he say, well, what do you mean? Whatever is presently flowing, the present breath would be hoive. I have to think about why he doesn't say that. I have a theory. I think because he's not talking about active time. He wants to just explain the structure of time. So he's not really coming to say, but I have to think about that as well, because I don't think he's actually talking about time. I'll get back about that. But point being is, he added now another element to explain the connection between the ratzo v'shuv, the histalkus and hispashtus, to the past and future. Again, quite fascinating. Yeah. Good. Here I will stop. So we'll stop here. Page 59. Around the 6 lines from the top, something like that. Yeah. 7 lines. But he's going to say more. I see it doesn't stop. That will wait for the next class. We'll stop here, page 59. Anybody want to comment? Any other questions, comments, afterthoughts?
Yeah, this stuff is amazing, fascinating concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you get a whole new take.
So basically, when we're saying that lemaila mehazman, it does not mean lemaila mehazman. It's lemaila mehazman in the way that we see zman.
Okay. So now you're beginning to see how this is going to help us understand what means lemaila mehazman. Exactly right. In other words, when we began discussing all this, remember, we are time and space creatures. Let's be honest. Everything about us is time and space. So it's hard for us to think, what does it mean, something beyond time? But once you start understanding the dynamics of what shapes time, what creates time, you start seeing existence very differently. Just like it's not crazy to understand that there's a world of Gan Eden or Atzilus higher than us, even though we can't see it and it's not measurable and you can't travel there physically in any sense, right? So the same thing, you can start realizing there are levels beyond time. All you have to do is go to that's higher than ratzo v'shuv. Go to levels that are higher than this chalkus. You're essentially touching a level that's beyond time. But we're going to get there. There's plenty of time to talk about that. But you're exactly right. That's exactly where this is going to help you understand our existence. It helps you understand existence in a much more realistic way. Because we think only way we understand reality is the only way to understand reality. It's simply not true. Just like I said, there are only that many apples that fit on this table, but there are billions of ideas that fit into a brain. So with time as well. Just because we understand past, present, future a certain way, that doesn't mean it's the only way to understand it. In other words, I'm not suggesting that we can suddenly do time travel and go back in time. But I do suggest that when you think of it this way, and you start saying to yourself, can I connect to Avram Avinu? Can I connect to my grandfather who's not here any longer on this earth? If I'm able to connect to some of these higher levels, it makes you think differently about connecting to other times in history and the very idea of Torah Nitzchias and the events that we spoke, Ayomim Ha'elin Iskarim V'Nasim. Pesach is coming. So yes, Pesach happened 3,300 and what is it going to be? 38 years ago. But we say B'chol der v'der chayav adam liras asatzmei ki'ilu yatzim mitzrayim. It gives you a whole new take on the very idea of eternal values, eternal experiences. Plenty, you'll see. This will transform how you look at things in a good way. For sure.
Rabbi Jacobson, if I may ask, it's wonderful to see you excited. Not that this is the only time you get excited about Chassidus when you teach, but obviously you've learned Samach Vav before. You're a master of Chassidus. This is fundamental, and yet you seem like you're learning it. Not exactly, but a little bit like the first time. You're like still like a curious guy. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just curious to understand. Like I would think this is like I don't know, part of the fundamentals of Chassidus that you have under your belt, and
That's the way to learn Torah. B'chol yom chadoshim. You are digging in it. You relive it. Not only relive it. It's like a new excitement.
That's true. Well, firstly, a few points, if I may. I had a very good teacher. His name was the Rebbe, and I heard him for thousands of hours, as you can imagine. I stood by the Farbrengens. My job was to remember, retain, and then review and recreate and reconstruct and publish and so on. And I saw this constantly in my great teacher. He would speak about ideas, not always completely new ideas. There were many times ideas he had discussed earlier. And there's always this, every time, this renewed passion and renewed excitement. There were times he told a story, and he told it almost not necessarily exactly the same way, but he would cry or laugh or some other emotional expression. So I guess I learned from the best.
Yeah,
that's number one. Number two,
you learned how to learn while you're teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Secondly, exactly as Rab Shlomo said, but not just as a cliche that, the Torah is b'chadash and so on, which is true, of course. Supposed to learn Torah b'chol yom yeh beinecha chadashim, not just kichadashim, chadashim. That every day Torah should be taught like new. I think when you learn it in a way that's personal, not just saying, okay, it's Hashem's Torah, since it's Hashem's Torah, how could I not learn it like a new thing? But you actually appreciate it personally, its relevance, its application to life, and finally the addition of teaching it to others, and you really have to explain it properly, and for the record, it's being recorded, and I know a lot of people listen to this. All of that adds to the compelling sense of urgency that I feel as I'm learning it now. And have I experienced it before? Yes, I have, even on this topic. But I have to say, learning this we do it slowly. Like we learned Ayim Beis. I learned Samach Vav many times. But I probably more in depth now than ever because, firstly, I've learned it a number of times. Secondly, I'm doing precisely that. Every line, we pour over every word. I mean, there's no word we skip, even if it's complicated. So all of that adds, I think, to that
a different
sense.
Experience. Yeah.
And
That's
to
the
me, I always,
concept of
when I learn and teach, I always ask myself one question. What is the relevance of this to life, to our lives? And how is this like indispensable? Like there's a lot of things we could be doing right now, New York time, 10:45 New York time, or 7:45 your time in California. And I think of it like, why is this more important than anything else? And in that sense, I like to feel I'm doing something that makes a difference, not just sitting around because I have nothing else to do. Let's learn Samach Vav. So, and all of that contributes to that sense of, vitality. And maybe, finally, it's a living example of what we're supposed to be doing with Zman and ratzo v'shuv, a constant renewal. It's like someone who's breathing all the time. Every time they breathe, you ask them, why are you breathing with the same passion like you breathed a minute ago? The answer is because it's life, and life never stops, and we're continuing the mechadash betuve, the constant renewal of the oscillating rhythm of ratzo v'shuv.
Beautiful.
That's the purpose of Avodas Tefillah. The whole thing of Avodas Tefillah is to make all of these things real, that you live it in real life.
Okay. Absolutely. My belief is that Yitzchak was asking me a personal how I experience it. So I shared that.
So you're davening a whole day.
I don't know. That I cannot say.
ביניהם מתפלל כל היום.
Halavai sheispal kol hayom. Halavai beinani, you know. Halavai sheispal adam kol hayom kulei. Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
How about you guys? You also feel excited?
Yeah, it's mind blowing. I can't wait to see how he uses this mashal of Zman to explain, just the properties of the Hamshacha, the ratzo v'shuv of Elikus. It's obviously that's what it's leading up to. So, I mean, time's important, but it's right now. It really, I think, is a mashal.
I think you'll find out it's much more than a muscle, but we'll see. Okay.
That's what you mentioned just before. The Rebbe is talking about Mashiach. The Rebbe leaves it. He's seeing it. He wants us to see it in that way.
Yeah. Yes.
I think what's interesting is, again, we bring up the physicists. I think if you also talk to the physicists about time, I think you're likely to find coincidence in the way that physics understands time and the way that Chassidus is explaining it. Now, again, you mentioned, well, physicists don't go into the place of before time. I don't know. I'm not a physicist, but
no. Some do. Theoretical physicists like to discuss. Like I've read plenty of material on where did time originate. Was time always the same type of time? I mean, there's Einstein's relative time. There's plenty on that topic too.
True.
I think it's a matter of really taking the best of what we have in Chassidus and talking to people who are open-minded, who have a good understanding of how different scientific theories on it, and maybe coming away with new perspectives and new insights,
100%.
Einstein, at the end, he absorbed some powerful things in Emunah from the theories that he had.
Yeah. Okay, let's stop here. I'm going to stop the recording. We are on page 59. Okay, around 10 lines into the top of the page, or less, 6 lines, I should say.